Good evening, everybody. This is the Valley Stream Book Club. We are very lucky today to have our special guest today, Mary Kelikoa. I hope I said it right. Where are you coming from right now?
I'm in Vancouver, Washington, which is
Okay,
just real close to Oregon.
so she's going to be talking about her book, Don't Ask, Don't Follow. She's going to give you a little background about herself before we get into the book. Okay, so you're going to pin it to Mary and get started.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, Mary Kelikoa. I'm from Vancouver, Washington. I've been a lifelong Pacific Northwest native. And prior to becoming an author, I was a legal secretary, paralegal for 18 years, and then self-employed for another 23 in a distribution company setting. I started writing when I was 27. Took a little bit of time off to start a company with my husband.
Yes, I
Went back to my writing at the age of 50. I actually debuted at 50 at the age of 55, and I'll be 60 next year. So, it's been a overnight success. It only took me like 30 some years to get my first book out there. But this is the very first book. Don't Ask, Don't Follow is my first standalone. But it is my sixth novel that I've written. I'm the author of the P.I. Kelly Pruitt mystery series set in Portland, Oregon. I debuted with that, like I said, in 2020. It was nominated for an Anthony Agatha and a Lefty for Best First Novel and a Seamus Award as well. So, and then in a couple years later, I did the Misty Pines mystery series, which is Hidden Pieces and Deadly Tides behind me. And that is set down at the Oregon coast where I spent a good portion of my childhood. And then Don't Ask, Don't Follow is set in Portland, which is again right across the river from where I live now. I was born in Portland, so it just seemed fitting. And I was a paralegal in Portland, so and this book is set in a law firm, of course, as you know, in Portland. So it's a little bit about my background. I'm married to a very Hawaiian gentleman. We live in Hawaii part-time when we're not here in Washington. And I have two very lovely stepdaughters and 8 grandchildren. And yeah, that's me.
Well, I
Hi.
just want to compliment you. Oh my God, I couldn't put the book down. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
in my day giving myself time to read.
I love that.
And
Every author loves to hear those words.
yeah, and then Sunday night, it was a Saturday or Saturday night. I read it till 2 in the morning, and then I woke up at like 6:30 and I was like, oh no, I'm finishing the book. It was so good.
Oh, I
I can't
appreciate
remember the last time I read a book like that I just absolutely was crazy with.
Oh, thank you. Oh,
Okay, feel free to mute yourself. I was telling Mary that I had a hard time getting the book, so I had gotten copies for everybody else. When I looked on the shelf, they were all gone, so I had to order some more copies. So I have not finished the book yet. So, but you can spoil it if you need to. Okay, I'm okay with that.
No, we're not gonna spoil it. You
I enjoyed the book, but the question I kept asking myself was, where's the line between caring for a loved one and and looking out for yourself?
yeah, that is the question of the book.
Because, I don't think that she had a basic distrust for the police per se. I kept saying, well, why doesn't she tell this to the police so they can start on this? Why? Just because her sister told her, don't ask, don't follow, that becomes her, Fredo?
Yeah. Well, I think, you have to look at her family dynamics, right? She and Lindsay are united and had been united as one, really, as children. They had a very distant mother and a father who was really more preoccupied with, his success versus necessarily being a parenting. And they really relied on each other. And for her, she just really protected her sister all the way through. And it's at some point, she does kind of lean into letting the police know, but she really wants to know what Lindsay is up to first. And as she begins to realize that maybe Lindsay can't reach out, I think that's when she leans more into the police. But she wants to find out more beforehand. And that is the question, how far would you go for somebody you love, to find out, to try to protect them as long as you can. It was something that she did as a child, and so she just kind of continued that through as an adult.
But I don't think Lindsay reciprocated, because Lindsay knew this was a very dangerous situation. And yet she told her sister essentially, don't tell anybody.
Right.
She knew that her
Yeah.
sister was going to follow.
She kind of put it as a contingency plan, just a little bit. For sure. But she did care for her sister when you ultimately know what the investigation was that she was looking into. I mean, why she went down the road she went down in the first place. It's just a different way of caring, I think, than what Beth does. So, slightly different. Yes.
I think that Henry, though, as you know, as he started knocking off people and following her and threatening her, I mean, I think she sort of had a very blind eye to the danger that he had, and to her and everybody else. So I kind of, thought maybe you should have made her more afraid of Henry.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think she was. I mean, I think she thought by staying out of sight, by trying to stay with Nova, trying to, be a little bit more incognito, right? That she was kind of sidestepping him. But obviously when she realized he'd come to the apartment, and that, I think that did terrify her quite a bit. And that's why she leaned on Kai, towards the end. So.
The interesting thing is that when we first meet Kai in the book, I said to myself, there's no way I would have believed the word he said. I would have called the police on him and had them come to the apartment immediately.
Yeah.
I was really surprised because I would have looked at it this way. Maybe what he's telling me is true, but I never heard my sister mention his name. He's in the apartment. How do I know what he's telling me and my sister's missing?
Hmm.
I would have called that. That was the one thing that I was like, there's no way I would have gone along and believed anything he said. I was afraid of him.
Well, I definitely created him to be a little bit on the questionable side. That's an interesting take. Yeah. Things that after the book is written, that's interesting. Had I thought about that before? Maybe.
Yeah, I would have, I mean, I can understand that you made him questionable. I thought he was too questionable. I mean, maybe, I would have called the police. I don't even think I would have gone to see if he really worked where he worked and see if other people there knew her sister. I wouldn't have given that much time. I think I would have been more, I don't know, vigilant on him.
Yeah.
But I was surprised that this whole Henry thing, she didn't tell the police more about him sooner.
Oh,
He was
okay. We seem to have lost Mary, so I'll have to see if she gets back on. She disappeared. Oh, there she is. Okay. Okay, sorry, Mary. Did you hear the last thing that Lorraine said?
What I said was this Henry, I would have told the police everything I knew about him right up front, because to me, he was really scary. And no matter who you were, oh, she just went out again.
Okay, we'll see if she gets back in again.
This was a great book, Mame. I almost wrote you an email. I said, I'm not going to bother her.
Okay, sorry, Mary.
That's okay.
Okay. So we were just saying how they really enjoyed the book. I just had a question for you. Okay, do you have a sibling that you kind of base this on?
It's interesting. A lot of people have asked me that question. Yeah, I do have an older sister. And the very first thing she said when she read the book, she was like, that is not me. I'm not, I'm not irresponsible like this. What are you talking about? But I did have an older brother who was very much in trouble on a regular basis. And I did spend a lot of my childhood covering for him, because I knew that the consequence for him when he got into trouble was much deeper and darker than like he had issues that without getting into too dark of it or deep into it. But it was always harder on him. If he got in trouble, things were much harder on him. So I worked really hard to protect him. And so I think that's what I really pulled when I wrote this book was that aspect of it. How far would you go to protect somebody you love? So yeah, so I did, but not my sister, my brother.
The reason why I asked is I am the middle sister of five.
Ah,
And so I had an older sister when I was growing up. She was supposed to take me out for driver's ed back in the day. Some of these people in Valley Stream will know. You know, we used to go around the and she would take me out for driver's ed. I was supposed to be practicing driving. Well, she would have me drive to her best friend's house, and I would sit there while she was having a party or having fun. But I never told anybody that here as my time was supposed to be learning to drive, and I was just sitting in the car while she was doing whatever she wanted. So I was always covering for her because otherwise she said later she wasn't going to take me out for driver's ed anymore, and I needed to get my license. So it was kind of like this that sort of thing, you know, you cover for somebody.
yes, to a certain extent, you do sometimes.
But I was wondering because, I said to myself, this writer knows legalities. And I said, but what made you write about this whole adoption scam? Was there something you saw or heard about or was in the news or something that intrigued you? Or how did
Yeah.
that come up to you?
That actually, it's funny because it was just rather inspired. I mean, my brother was adopted, and so I think that was part of the lean into that. But it's funny, after I wrote the book, there was an actual case of an adoption agency that had been doing exactly what was happening in the book on a different level, but taking the babies and from a group of people that were not able to really protect themselves and selling children. And so it was kind of interesting. It was like, oh, well, this really did happen. It's funny how sometimes truth is more stranger than fiction. And so, but really, when I write, I tend to, I'm a pantser, what they call a pantser. And so I have a general idea of the story I'm going to write, but it really develops as I go. So I didn't have like a whole lot of idea where this book was going to go until I started writing it. And so I kind of fly by the seat of my pants sometimes. And then I go back to check and see how accurate that the information is I've written.
Well, I do think the subject matter about the whole adoption agency thing is what really was one of the key things that made it so interesting, this book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a twist, right? That was part of it for sure. Yeah. And I did not know that that would even be an element, really, other than the adoption stuff. I really didn't know where that was going to go until I was in the midst of it. So,
Did you have to do a lot of research into the whole element around, the pregnant women, the unfortunate ones, the prostitutes, the drug addicts, and that culture?
I didn't do a ton of research. I mean, other than just life experience, right? My brother was homeless for a while. I've known homeless people, of course. And just I think just from life experience, I've seen some of it. It's unfortunately, it's like you can think of kind of the worst scenario and it's probably true, right? And so I really just worked in that realm of what do I know? What have I seen? How does this make it work inside the book? Um, so unfortunately, that is such an aspect, this group of people are targeted so often. And so I didn't do a lot of research as far as legalities of like how it all would work. Some of that I just knew from my 18 years of being in the legal profession. I knew how, the steps that would need to be taken. And of course, I know lawyers that I did double check with on a few things, to make sure I had some of that correct. So, what did you think of Nova? Did everybody like Nova?
Well, I thought Nova was an aunt or a mother,
Mhm.
actually, of Lindsay
Uh,
right from the get-go. That's what I thought.
yeah, you were close.
Yeah, yeah. There were a lot of the stuff. There was only one surprise to me, and I'm not going to say at the end of the book because Mamie hasn't finished the book. But everything else kind of that happened, I suspected by hints you dropped through the book and said, oh, well, I guess this is this and this is that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I really enjoy that, because, like you get one little hint and you feel like, oh, you're a rocket scientist, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, I can't say enough about the book.
Oh,
I
good.
I already told my sister-in-law is going to get the book. I already told her to read the book.
Nice. I appreciate that.
Now, Mary, you said that this is a standalone and you've had written other two series. So,
Mhm.
so since I don't really know at the end of this book, there's no possibility this being a series then.
I've been asked about that because really it is set up in a way that it could be a series, because she is a paralegal and Lindsay is an investigative reporter. At the time that I finished the book, it's funny when I did the first drafting of the book, I actually set it up that perhaps they would go out and become more of a PI agency looking for children that had been displaced, or stolen. And my agent asked me to change it. And so she asked me to change it into a standalone. So the ending is such that it is complete. That said, because of who they are, I could certainly create a series. I just don't have a story idea at this point for one, but never say never. I could
Oh,
certainly go back.
I thought it would be interesting if the next book would be just them looking for the children over all the years,
Mhm.
and researching and finding and learning about them and
Yeah,
them. I thought that alone would be a book I'd want to read.
yeah. I would have to have some sort of suspense or killing of some sort in the book. So somebody, this is murder mystery. We'd have to thriller, right? We'd need some kind of, but I definitely had thought about that too. You know, yeah, I mean, certainly somebody might not want somebody to be found for some particular reason and might throw up some obstacles. There's story ideas brewing. I've just had other ideas that have been a little bit more prevalent in my mind. So I've been writing other books. And then the third book in my Misty Pine series is out next year. So I'm under contract with another, book to get finished up. So trying to get a few of those contracts taken care of. And then, you never know.
What is the
I'm glad you
Misty
in the direct.
Pines?
No,
What is the Misty Pine?
I'm sorry, say again.
What is the Misty Pine series about?
The Misty Pine series is set down at the Oregon coast. And it features Sheriff Jax Turner. And I grew up at the Oregon coast, but actually Hidden Pieces, what inspired that series was when I was 14, a girl in the class behind me, Charmel Ulrich, was abducted. Her and her friend were out walking on a country road and she was abducted. And unfortunately, she was murdered and her body was found at the Oregon coast. Pretty much affected everything about our hometown at that point. Like we never walked those country roads, alone again after that. And that became the inspiration for the cold case in Hidden Pieces. And so I built that book around that cold case. And then in the current case, a 14-year-old girl has been abducted. Sheriff Jax Turner is a little bit on the brink of ending it all because he is still in grief around losing his 5-year-old daughter to leukemia and his marriage. shortly after to his FBI agent ex-wife, Abby Kanikoa. But this last case pulls him back from the edge, and he's determined to find that 14-year-old girl. And then, of course, the two, the cold case and the current case intersect in that book. So that really became the inspiration for this series. And it's actually one of my favorite books to write because of the Oregon coast, because I grew up around that ocean and that forest. I just love every time I get to go back and write about Sheriff Jax Turner. It's my happy place. So,
Where do you think that that Rachel's not wanting her father to pay for law school and pay for her education, where did that come from? What was your inspiration for that?
just that she knows the strings that get attached to that. You can take the money, but there's also then you have to give up some of that control. And so she didn't want to do that. She wanted to do it on her own. And I think also, and I think I stated in the book too that, really she doesn't even know if she wants to truly follow in his footsteps. And so by not taking his money, she kind of pushes off the decision to whether she really is going to do it or not. I don't know that she really wants to be a lawyer. She likes what she does to a certain degree, but she's also a workaholic and, you know, think that the paralegal aspect really does feed that part of her without her dad being in control of her totally. So it's kind of a balance. So she's also a people pleaser, right? So she's still working for her dad's law firm, but it's just that balance, It's sort of like I'm going to do this so I don't have him on my case, but I'm not going to take his money so he can't totally tell me what to do.
They were at such different points in their careers. It was hard to believe that, she and Craig were the same age.
Yeah, well. And not necessarily. I mean, I worked for a lot of lawyers. When I worked at, a law firm, I was working with a lot of lawyers my age, slightly older to some, sometimes if I was in my early 20s, obviously, but when I hit that 30 mark, I was right in there.
Well, do you think that was a like this the standard sexism though? Like the men are like gung ho to become the partner? That ha aspect?
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's very common for sure. It's very common among lawyers. Uh, that they are on partner track and really putting in those hours. But, and I worked with far more men than I ever did women in the legal field, for sure, in the attorney realm. But yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
I think his stepmother, the judge, probably had the brother, make something of himself.
Well, true. Yeah.
She was interested in, having her foster child or adopted child, make something of
Yeah.
himself.
Well, she was a judge, right? So she's going to
Yes.
have high standards for sure.
Was that her stepmother though, or was that her mother?
The judge
Yes.
it was adopted mother. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
She definitely was not warm and cuddly.
No. She was on career track for sure. Not
But
to
it was
say, go ahead.
it was interesting how complicit and easily complicit it was for the judge and Rachel's father to, be part of this plot.
Yeah. Well, they were necessary to the plot, right? You had to have a judge sign the paperwork. You had to have a lawyer prepare the paperwork. So, but I also think on some level they really had a really perverted thought of that they were doing something good in some ways. Like somehow they were offering up these something better, a better way of life for the children they were taking. It's a very twisted way of thinking, but I think on some level they believed that until it became something else, and then Beth's father didn't agree so much with it and wanted out of it.
Well, it's like a lot of things today where people think they're above the law, you know.
Yeah.
I thought it was very fitting.
Yeah, and they feel justified in their actions or yeah.
Actually have a lawyer with us, Mary. Irving is a lawyer.
Oh, nice.
More than a lawyer. I handled some twisted adoption cases that we had to change the law as a result because the parties involved did not follow up and left me in a lurch because I had conflicts with my own clients over what was going on and what should go on and where the law was going. So it's a interesting take what I'm hearing. I'm listening to a few books. I haven't finished the book, but I got like what was interesting. It was a Joanne Brown case around here where the law secretary got murdered by one of the women he was dating. Of course, they tried to get me involved in that. So I'm interested in hearing what everybody's saying and where this case is going, and when to finish the book.
Good.
And didn't you have any? Didn't you have conflicts in writing the book?
Did I have conflicts in writing the book?
Well, legally, I mean, having been involved on the inside.
Well, I was never involved in a particular case, so I don't think so. No, I think it was, I just took from my experience in the legal field. Um, but I did not divulge anything that I would know or nothing specific. Nothing's true in the book. It's all made
I
up.
consider myself only a reader because I can't write, number one, maybe, or I'm afraid that I'm revealing something that's confidential.
Ah, yeah,
And I just can't get involved.
yeah.
I'm listening and enjoying the discussion. And I'll finish the book in 2 days. I know that.
I love it.
See what you did.
I think Irving's talking about. So what, when you said you were in the legal profession, you didn't do anything like criminals type
No,
act? No.
no. I actually worked in insurance defense for the last 8 years of my 18 years. And I did mostly litigation type of work. So, but nothing criminal. I did actually, at one time, I was doing transcription for a defense attorney, but it was a short stint. I actually didn't enjoy that work very much. The cases were a little unsettling. Let's put it that way. So, so I went back to my insurance defense. It was much different, much better.
So you mentioned that you're under contract. Um, so you're writing full time now?
I,
How much how much time do you have to devote to this then?
well, I'm retired. My husband and I sold our company last year, so I'm a full-time writer now. Um, So I work probably about 4 hours steady in the morning. I would write from like 7:30 to about noon, 11:30 or 12. And then in the afternoon, sometimes my husband accuses me that I'm always in my office. So, the truth is I'm always back here editing and reworking a paragraph, reworking a page, a chapter. But generally it's 4 hours in the morning. So. But I write about 6 days a week, sometimes seven, if I'm in the middle of a book. Right now, I'm actually in the middle of writing a new novel. So when I'm immersed in a book, I tend to not want to leave it for very long. So I'll write more often than I normally would. So
It's so when you finish this one, do you take a break in between? Because since you have two series that you did, I would say that wouldn't that be a little bit hard to keep the worlds apart, you know?
Uh, they're very different that they're not too difficult. As soon as I finish this book, I need to go back over to the third book in that series. It's due to the publisher in March. But it's in first draft. So I need to really hit it, you know, but I'll be ready to hit that by mid-November. I'll be done with this book probably. It takes me about 3 months to write a novel in first draft. And so I'll have this one knocked out probably by the end of October, first part of November. I'll hop over to the Killer Tracks book, the third book in the series. And then I might take a little time off, maybe a week or two. I really don't sit well very long. I'm kind of like Beth. I'm a workaholic. So I have to keep writing. It's sort of like breathing. It's just without it, I'm not sure what to do in a day. So it's kind of my routine.
I get the impression writing comes very easy to you, Neil.
Oh, I don't know if it comes easy to anybody. It's like pulling teeth sometimes. But I do love to tell stories, you know. And I seem to have lots of them in my head, always, you know. I just got back from Greece 2 days ago, and I'm already sketching out like, oh, you know, murder on a cruise ship on the Greek Isles. You know, I mean, there's always something going on. That just offers some sort of tidbit, some little inspiration. So, and so as long as people enjoy my stories, I'm going to keep writing them, and even if I didn't publish another book, I think I'd still be writing because it's just part of who I am. So it's how I express.
So the books behind you, Hidden Pieces
Mhm.
and the Deadly Tides.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming those are like murder mysteries, like something like what we just read.
Yeah, they're a little bit more procedural because they center around a sheriff, and his crew. It's a little bit a Longmire-ish, William Kent Kruger. In fact, William Kent Kruger blurbed my second book, Deadly Tides, and said it was a labyrinthine mystery. So, you know, it's a little twisty, a little bit of a twisty mystery. That one was a fun one to write. That's actually around a severed foot. Washing ashore, which sounds terrible, but in the Pacific Northwest, we actually have a portion called the Salishan Sea that pulls in things from the ocean, and severed feet wash ashore in the Pacific Northwest. And it's not nefarious, generally speaking. It just happens to be what tends to detach from the body when it's in the ocean. And a lot of times it's, you know, being people who have drowned, different things like that. But of course, I write murder mystery, so it has a whole other reason that they're washing ashore. So, but that was a fun book because that was something I'd heard years ago, and I thought, oh, somehow, someday, I have to work that into a book. So, Deadly Tides happens to be that one.
So those two books, both of them has a lot to do with the setting you have. I mean, I haven't gotten enough to see where the setting is in this one. The Portland setting doesn't play a role, but those two books, the setting seemed to play a role in the plot.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Oregon coast is sort of a character all of its own. It's very moody, you know, a lot of moss hanging off the trees. It's misty quite often. It's foggy. It can be 90 degrees in Portland, and you're going to be socked in fog and 60 degrees at the Oregon coast because of the inversion that happens.
Hi, Joe.
And so it just tends to be
You want to come over?
a character. So yeah, so that's why one of the reasons I really loved putting it down there is because it can work to really be an obstacle when the sheriff is trying to get someplace or find something. Because you know the forest can be like a bog, you know, it can be hard to get through, treacherous. So yeah. It really is its own character.
I'm beginning to get hints of what's going to happen in the rest of the book, but I know that there's a lot more to go before I get to that part. Um, when you originally put the book together, I mean, like how do you have to edit out, or did you feel like this was a pretty clean book? You know, like first draft.
Oh gosh, no. Yeah. So actually, because I can't tell the spoiler on it. But let's just say there was a different ending originally. So when I first wrote the book, I had a completely different ending. Um, and a publisher was interested in the book, but they wanted it a different ending. So I had to go back in and, a book like this, I draft it once before my agent ever sees it or before my reading group ever sees it. I've gone through it probably 4 or 5 times. Then my agent sees it, and then we do another 2 or 3 times before we send it out. So we thought we were in pretty good shape. And then the publisher says, no, I want you to change it. So if you change it, they didn't offer me a contract, but they suggested that I change it. If I change it, they'll take a look at it again. Well, they didn't want it after I spent 2.5 months of editing the book, which is okay. So my agent submitted it out to Ocean View and they bought it within 3 weeks. So, I think it ultimately, the other publisher didn't want it, but it made the book stronger. And so I was happy with the change and I agreed with the change. I don't usually, I always figure people in publishing, they're a lot smarter than I am. They know what sells books. They know how the industry works, and I'm not going to sit and argue with them. So if they really want something changed, I don't usually tie myself too much to a storyline. If I can change it, I will change it. And so, but it just took a little extra time to get it done. So in answer to your question, lots and lots of drafts.
Are publishers always right? Have you found that there have been instances where the publisher insisted upon a change or a direction? You didn't think that was right, but you went with their suggestion and ultimately you felt that your way would have been better.
Not yet, not so far. This book in particular was the only one I've had to really do that with. The other books have not had been requested to have changes like that. Um, well, that's not true. Derailed, my very first book. I had a very tough editor on my very first novel. She was very hardcore, and she didn't like to be like if I said, "Oh, I don't know about that," she'd be like, "No, that's the way it needs to be." And she didn't she's like, "I like your character, but she needs to be more likable." And I was like, "But she's sarcastic." And she was like, "Yeah, less sarcasm." And I'm like, "Okay." So I don't know. The book, was nominated for 4 awards, so I can't say that she was wrong. It was a great experience working with this editor, even though I didn't always agree with her. She made me a better writer at the end of the day, which any good editor that's what they do. So I can't say that. I mean, maybe my ego says, oh, it would have been fine the other way. But how do I argue with the nominations? Clearly the book was, got the nods. So I guess maybe she knew what she was talking about. So we'll give her that.
You had mentioned your reading group. So did you, as you were like growing up, did you write on the side, or did you, attend some kind of seminar or something that took you to the path of writing?
I was a late bloomer. I was a reader. I always loved to read. And I found Mary Higgins Clark, when I was about 18, 19. I love Jay Jance, Faye Kellerman, Sue Grafton, of course. And but it wasn't until I was 27 that I actually decided to write. And it was a weird way. So I was a secretary at the time, and the secretary next to me had always wanted to write a book. And we were like, well, we have an hour every day during lunch, so let's write a book together. So really, that's what we did for about a year. We would go to lunch and we would write this novel. And of course, the book did not sell. And she never decided to write another book, but I had the bug at that point. And so I kept writing. I went on to write 3 more novels. The last one I wrote was Derailed, but it was 1999 and or 2000, and my husband and I had decided to start a company. So I set the book down and set it aside, and I just worked our company for the next 15 years, and then we sold that portion of our company. It was a retail store, so we had retail stores, and so we sold it. And I took that book that I'd written in 2000, and I looked at it and I thought, well, this isn't so bad. And this is, 2016 at this point. And I entered it into a contest called Pitch Wars, and I won. What I won was being mentored by a published author. I was mentored by Kelly Garrett, who wrote the books Like a Sister, and Sarah Henning. And then after I won the thing and they mentored me, I got an agent, and then I got the book contract. But, that book was written 20 years, really from the day that it published. So that's kind of that story. But so yeah, so long story short, 27, and didn't know I wanted to write until then.
I think that's very fascinating because we've talked to a lot of authors, and some of them say how they've gone to classes, they've um, they've always had the writing bug. So, people come to the profession all different ways.
They really do. In fact, I mean, I've taken classes like online courses and things like that. But you know, I don't admit this too often, but I did not go to college and I did not even graduate high school. I had a very rough senior year. I had a lot of family drama. And so I had to go back for that final credit in order to get my high school diploma. And then I worked. College was not something that was championed in my family. We didn't have the money for it. Work, work, work. That was what I was taught. Excuse me. And so I really have had to self-teach myself all the way through. And I find people and resources that I've needed but I also prior to my senior year, I was an A student in English. So I mean, I've always had a tendency for English. But I didn't come to it the traditional way. I'm a hustler. That's what I always say. Just kind of get what I need to do, and keep growing and keep going.
Now that AI is popular, have you considered using that for your books?
Not for a second. No, to me, what would be the fun? I mean, I write to create, and I like to be surprised by the story, and it would take away all the things that I love about writing. So,
But it could gather more information that you could twist in different ways.
yeah, my brain can do that too. I've got a twisted mind.
I was surprised in the book that Beth forgave her mother for everything that she did, since she hadn't been that close to her mother, her foster mother to begin with.
Yeah.
And then after she kept this secret and she didn't say that Nova was her real aunt, and she was very forgiving.
I'm not sure she totally gave. It was more really about, holding on to a strand of something, something that's been there. I'm not willing to burn it all down quite yet. If there was a second book, I could see maybe that wouldn't necessarily survive. But I think in the moment, I didn't want to push it someplace that didn't feel organic to the story. And so I think she's just trying to kind of hold at the moment.
Okay.
And clearly the mother was suffering. I mean, with her, alcoholism and
Yeah, her prescription stuff. Yeah,
so she was not a happy person.
she was not. It's a very dysfunctional little family, for sure.
Well, I want to thank Mary for taking the time. What time of the day is it there?
It is 5:17.
Oh, okay, so that's not bad. We're we're at 8:17 at night. And I think that we all appreciated the book. I would definitely am going to try. I'm not going to stay up all night. I'm sorry. I'm a
What?
little sorry, but I'll finish it now. And so I'll know what the ending is. But you know, I see there's a lot of twists and turns that it's going to happen. Um, thank you so much for joining with us, Mary. Does anyone have any last comments they'd like to tell Mary? You know,
Just
I
that I'm gonna go read her other books now.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, they were great. That was great.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
okay.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, guys. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.